The mix of creatures were mulling around the room, waiting for class to actually start. None of them really wanted to be here, as they were all voluntold to be there in the first place. However, they all immediately paid attention when they saw a strange, amphibious-looking creature walk in. One quick look of his uniform, and they could see that he outranked everybody there, which meant he was the instructor. And everyone quickly got to their seats, sat down, and shut up very quickly. Before he started, the creature looked at them, seemed to move a little bit at the base of his throat, as though it was trying to clear its throat for something. Since everyone is here, let us start our class. Welcome to the first use of communications equipment for those of you who are going to be operators of our communications equipment for the Grand Armies. Before we continue, I must bring a certain issue to light. Once your class is completed, when you are out with your units, you will always want to keep your equipment secured as much as possible. Keep prying eyes away, as captured personnel can leak vital information. This will come into play more as we go into the histories of our class. Do also never let anyone else carry your communications equipment. They may not treat it with the proper respect, and damaged equipment could cost everyone here their lives, as well as those in your units as well. It is important that we have quick and accurate communications. That is why you are all chosen, as you are particularly the smartest ones in your unit. Along with these warnings, do not let anyone help by watching your communication gear, as in holding it, as in having possession of it at any time. They may adjust something, even by accident, and you cannot allow this to happen. It could stop you from completing your mission. And this is extremely important. Everyone knows that the slowdown of one unit during a mission can actually disrupt the entire battle plan, and you must always remember this. With all these warnings, above all else, there is one thing you must remember. That is, do not ever, under any circumstances, allow a human to handle your equipment. Everyone was quiet as they were trying to figure out this. A raised hand, he didn't even wait to get called on, simply asked, "Why?" Because once a human has your, as they call it, radio, they never seem to call it communications equipment, they start performing acts that defy all logic. Everyone was paying attention, with their eyes wide open, none of them seeming to blink, as they wanted to know what was going on. For example, on Zeta 6, I'm sure everyone is familiar with that battle. An entire division was pinned down, as the enemy held the high positions. With this, they also had artillery that was able to fire down on us. Logic dictates that we must simply break a hole in their lines, and then the rest can simply charge through, making sure they make quick work of those behind the lines. However, that did not happen thanks to what happened when our communications specialist was hit. The humans call this an RTO. We still don't understand the reason for this strange initialism, but when the RTO was struck, Specialist Jones took over on the communications equipment. When told to call for plunging fire up the hill to allow the advance, he simply looked over and he gave a strange, half-predatory grin. We know this now as a smirk. He called for an entire line of massive ordnance airburst munitions to be dropped from the nearest frigate in precision orbit. It was strange to watch. Everyone has most likely seen the video of him moving with practiced precision to call in this ordnance to make sure it was right where he needed to be. However, what really threw everyone off was when they asked for authorization. He started screaming into the radio, screaming how he had authorization. This was strange, and the frigate from synchronous orbit kept trying to find out what was going on.
What was the frontline trace of all of our people? They didn't want to get anyone too close, also known as danger close. We are all familiar with this. And they kept asking if anyone was going to be within range. Are they going to be able to strike the enemy within range? Well, Specialist Jones was on saying,
"Just drop the fucking rounds! We're dying out here!"
the last thing anyone heard before the explosion was Specialist Jones yelling, "Incoming!" And then there was a burst, which, as we know now, is just the air mixing with a vaporized fuel to make everything very, very volatile. And then the actual explosion would go off. It seemed each of them were firing off in sequence, from our port side to our starboard side, all the way in front of us. And it was so close that the debris from the explosion was falling down on top of all of us. We all stayed down because we didn't know when it was going to stop. It was so close that most of us, the only thing we could hear was a whole bunch of ringing in all of our auditory sensors. It was insane. However, when everyone decided to get up, they saw that Specialist Jones was simply standing there with the hand mic into his ear. When everyone was looking at him, he turned at us and simply said,
"What?"
the commander then simply turned to him and screamed, "What in the seven hells were you thinking?" Specialist Jones would simply turn and look and say,
"The ridgeline was an issue, so I just deleted it."
you would think that if this was just a one-time happening, we wouldn't have such an important rule to never let the humans near the radio, ever, ever. Because there was another time, and this includes those of you who are going to be working communication systems on ships. The very first time they came up against an outpost that they weren't sure if it was hostile or not. One of the human fire control officers was able to be put in charge. And yet, even though he was an officer now, at the time he was simply a petty officer, third class. And when he was given command of the artillery batteries for the ships, what did he do? He'd controlled a time on target and called in every battery within range to fire on a simple observation post at the same time. Though amazing how he could time his targets so well that every single piece of ordnance struck at the same time. The station, which was set inside an asteroid made almost entirely of Ketracel, as we know, which is very difficult to break through, was completely atomized by the amount of main battery rounds that struck it. So much for gathering intelligence on something like that. Our soldiers were even angry that they could not even show their prowess in battle. There was nothing left to raid, just atomized dust in the void of space.
The instructor calmed themselves.
As you understand, class, humans are a great asset. But if you let one of them use any of your communication devices, they will happily destroy entire sections of a continent, claiming that that's just how they roll, how they deal with things. They just remove them. However, I personally believe that sometimes they call in this much explosives just for fun. Isn't that right, Master Sergeant Jones?
The instructor was looking to the back of the class, and everyone turned back to see what he was looking at. Sure enough, former Specialist Jones was standing in the back of the class with a extremely wide, predatory smile that seemed to reach from ear to ear. The students in the class saw this, and all of them got a shiver that went through their prospective body parts that made them all realize that this one here was a dangerous animal. The master sergeant slowly stepped through the center of class and to the front, and then simply waved his hand towards the amphibious personnel. "My associate here is correct. We humans do end up calling in a whole lot more ordnance than we really have to, but we want to make sure that the target is down. Along with that, we want to make sure whoever's down doesn't want to get back up even if they can. Though, in spite of my friend's warnings that we might get a little, shall we say, overzealous, each time we've done this, our RTOs act with professionalism and we make sure that the target is completely destroyed. There's no question ever. However, we've also saved a whole bunch of lives because the radio, or as you like to call it, the communications equipment, is probably the most dangerous piece on the battlefield. But not only can it end a whole bunch of lives and take out a good portion of continents, as my friend would say, it has also saved a whole bunch of lives. Now, if you'll sit back and relax, and let me tell you how a bunch of human radio men, along with their human associates, were able to save the SS Autonomy, and in doing so, stop a small conflict from escalating to a massive one.